Hey guys, Noful Jar here from Life with Sixth Sense. Here we try to learn more about ourselves to make life seem just a little simpler. Enjoy the podcast. Hey guys, Noful Jar here from Life with a Sixth Sense, and today I'm joined with world-renowned violinist Kerson Leong, and correct me if I say anything wrong or if I say your name wrong, Kirsten. But you won the menuing competition back in 2010, and you're also going to be the artist in residence for the Metropolitan Orchestra in the fall, which to me, being a violist, is actually quite impressive. And you're teaching at the Jacob School of Music this summer. So, yeah, hey man, thanks so much for being here today.
Oh, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here, and you're pronouncing everything great. So
oh,
no
great,
worries about that.
perfect. I was actually worrying about that because people always say my name wrong, and so I'm always trying to make sure I say other people's names right. But first off, let's just get to. I actually don't know much about you. I haven't talked to you much, but when did you start violin, and how did you actually get into it and stuff?
Well, I started violin when I was 4.5.
Okay. Yeah.
So I started when I was 4.5, but I kind of came from a musical family. My mom is a pianist, and my dad has been kind of a lover of classical music ever since much before I was born. So in a way, I kind of was already exposed to music from a very, very young age. And in fact, I even started to learn piano at the age of 2, actually, with my mom. Which is of course natural since she's a pianist, and of course just to and I think it was good in that it already kind of kind of gave me a bit of ear training, and also to get used to listening and also interacting with an instrument. So in a way, I think when I started violin later, and I'm pretty sure, I mean, I don't have an exact, I'm not exactly sure how I started the violin, but when I started the violin, it was kind of still, it just sort of happened naturally. I think at one moment they bought me. My parents kind of had a very small 1/16 size violin, or something very, very small.
Yeah, it's
and,
tiny.
And in no time, I think it sort of really blew up. I think I somehow really connected with the instrument somehow, just because it was, I don't know, just playing a string instrument seems very physical.
It's a lot different than doing a wind instrument like the oboe or something where I guess they're both physical, but it's interesting that you actually decided to do a string instrument instead of a wind instrument.
In a way, it's interesting, and I think somehow I gravitated quite naturally towards the violin because of its characteristics, and just the fact probably at that age I found it was just something very fun to do. So yeah.
Have you ever actually taken time off the violin, or did you constantly just work hard for the past 20 years or so?
Well, I constantly worked for the last I think now it's 17 years.
17 years,
17 years on the violin. Of course, I've taken breaks once in a while. I mean, for maybe a few days at a time, which I think also is good to do. I think because after you come back, you just feel you always feel like something's changed, or something is you kind of approach things from a clean slate somehow again. So I think that's necessary. But in general, I've never taken really massive amounts of time off in a way.
Okay.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, sometimes when I go, I think in the past when I went for vacation, let's say with the family, but that was a long, long time ago. But then I probably would touch the instrument much less during an extended period of time. But I never really stopped for one big period of time. I always constantly kind of working at it, I guess.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned taking breaks, or I guess I mentioned taking breaks, but what I find for me personally, being a violist, whenever I take some time off and I come back, for example, if I take maybe 2-3 days off, or 2 days off because I'm stressing or something, and I'll go watch master classes or watch videos or listen to music during those 2-3 days. As soon as I come back, I actually find I play it differently, and I'm noticing different things in my playing, and I'm hearing things differently. And I don't know.
Absolutely.
Have you used that to your benefit too?
Yeah, in a way, absolutely. Sometimes you just feel like, yeah, after perhaps significant work and kind of constantly drilling for a certain
Yeah.
period of time, then you just feel like, yeah, maybe I need a little bit of time off and kind of just to refresh my perspective a little bit. And
Yeah.
so, sometimes you just go online and yeah, you listen to some great recordings. You look up some interesting videos and also just do other things in a way,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
which could actually complement in some way, in some way, and these things you can take back, and it comes back to playing the fiddle. But I think after, as exactly as you said, I think it definitely changes certain things about the way you practice, about the way you play, about the way you perceive music
Yeah. Yeah.
after these sort of periods. So for me, it's necessary. I think sometimes. I think
Yeah.
for sure. I mean, to stay in shape, I find one thing about string instruments is that it does require a good amount of constant work to stay in shape because
Yeah.
it's such a not only a physical kind of a not only very physical work, but also very kind of physically unnatural
Mental too. Yeah.
position. And exactly, and it takes a lot of, in a way, a lot of concentration, whether we are aware of it or not. But I think it's nice, yeah, to just to to take some time sometimes and to reapproach and come back. And I always find that it's always had positive repercussions.
Yeah.
Always, yeah. So.
And like I've been following your social media for quite some time, and I see you playing the Cacciaturri Concerto and the Beethoven Concerto with different orchestras and stuff. And I just, for a personal question, like, what's your life like? Because I know you're in Belgium right now, and you've been playing chamber works with a bunch of people around the world and a bunch of little recitals here and there. Like, what's your life like? Like, how busy are you? Like, so then I then ask, how do you practice to get to that?
Yeah, at the moment, yeah, it's things have been going really well. Have been going. It's been getting busier and busier for me since
Yeah.
I think in a way things really took off very suddenly after I won the menuing competition back in 2010,
Right.
and since then, I mean, already then I started getting much more engagements to solo with orchestras and to play in different festivals and stuff like that. And I think it's just now I feel like it's just been steadily climbing ever since then. And I feel like now things have been really fortunate to do a lot of interesting projects and to really do what I
Want
kind
to
of
do with your life?
feel
Yeah.
exactly and feel most comfortable doing, which is of course I feel very comfortable as soloing with orchestra and playing different concertos and stuff. I think that's really something that I grew to love in these past few years,
Yeah.
and I'm doing much more of these days, which is great. And also doing a lot of chamber music since I'm now in Belgium
Yeah.
as a sort of artist in residence here at the Queen Elizabeth Music Chapel, and that allows me also to just interact with other musicians and musicians of the same age actually as me,
Okay. Wow.
which is great, which is something I love, and yeah, and of course all of this involves a lot of traveling. I mean,
Yeah.
I travel, I fly very, very often these days. I mean, especially between, let's say, between Belgium and Canada and elsewhere. I mean, I spend a lot of time during the year here in Belgium because it's a great environment to work and
Okay.
to practice and to really concentrate. I mean, the music chapel is kind of situated in a sort of wooded area. It's kind of very away from the city life. Um, so
Okay.
it's great to be here, like to really work. I mean, if you really need to concentrate for a week or two, or and but yeah, a lot of the time during the year I'm elsewhere playing concerts and constantly moving from place to place. And
Right.
of course, the summers are often by far the busiest times for me because of certain festivals and yeah, just traveling between festivals, playing concerts with orchestra or with chamber music. Yeah,
Sounds like
it's
a good
a
time.
yeah, it's a great. I think I mean, of course, it's tough in that I think
Oh yeah.
it's a very, of course, it's a very hectic lifestyle, but also it can be a very um,
Rewarding.
rewarding lifestyle. Um, and it can be, in a way, I think of it always as sort of half very hard work and half vacation almost. In the
Yeah.
way that you're able to kind of, this job that you're doing is taking you to different places and new places which you have yet to discover, and you're able to actually absorb kind of everything around you and meet different people and explore different cultures. But at the same time, it's not like you really have that time as a tourist to go around and really explore things in depth. But because you're doing, of course, you're performing and you're rehearsing and you're practicing and doing other kind of things. But as long as you're in a new place, and it's always rewarding. Just trying to absorb as much as you can. So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because whenever I like to me personally, like whenever I talk to like older people who are professors, for example, or soloists or orchestra players, they always talk about like all these memories they've created through this job, like playing music, right? And the stereotype is for people who don't actually understand music is that like music is you don't do anything serious and stuff like that, but like I talk about this with my family a lot because they're musicians too, and they talk about how like music is this own world, right? And we all have like from the outside it just seems so simple, like whatever, you play scales, you play caprices, whatever, not hard, whatever. But as soon as you delve into it, you realize that there's so much emotion involved. There's this sense of like family connection.
Absolutely,
It's
absolutely.
actually, to me, it's the most beautiful thing like you could ever see in someone's career. And yes, it's stressful and stuff, but once it's like just like any other stressful time, once the stress is done and you're done with it, suddenly you actually look back and you actually figure out what you've learned and everything. And that actually leads to my next question. Like I'm sure like all this repertoire that you're playing right now are stuff that you've been playing since you were a kid, right? Like for example, let's say like the past couple months ago you played the Beethoven concerto. When did you actually start learning that concerto?
Well, in a way, that's an interesting question
Yeah.
because for sure, I've a lot of pieces in my repertoire are from way back. I mean, from when I learned them as a kid almost. But in terms of the Beethoven concerto specifically, actually, I learned that quite recently.
Okay.
Yeah, in relation to that concert, which is now on YouTube. But it's interesting because there is a difference between, I think, really learning a piece and revisiting a piece. In
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
in that I think, and in a way, I mean, this is sort of how I feel, but I think the fact that I learned the Beethoven concerto quite recently is quite a blessing in a way,
Okay. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
already I'm able to kind of, in terms of the Beethoven, of course, it's one of the
Most important extravagant
one of the
concertos.
greatest.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah, one of the greatest, if not the greatest, and the most important violin concerto ever written. But it's just something that regardless of how you work at it, I mean, before you even approach it, you are intimidated by the fact that you will learn Beethoven violin concerto,
Yeah.
because because its reputation, precedes it. I mean, for violinists, and everyone says that, oh, it's difficult, and that it's super awkward, and you have to have some sort of maturity to play it,
Yeah.
and which in a way, I mean, it can be true in that, I mean, the experience itself also for the musician, I think it can be much more rewarding if indeed you have something very concrete and very, very, you have such a conviction almost behind the notes and the way you want to play it in a way.
Hmm.
And I find that learning it recently has kind of immediately given me sort of this kind of large background of things that I've accumulated over the years to work on, to work from in a way,
Hmm.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
and so I could really find. I mean, when going about interpreting a piece, and of course a piece of this caliber,
Yeah.
exactly what you really want to say in a piece like that. And what I find in a way it's easier to do that than to actually revisit a piece which you've probably learned and you've played, like, a lot of times
Hmm.
since you were very young. Because in a way, I think, of course, we go through stages. We change as human beings, and we have different kind of expectations for ourselves and criteria in a way, and also, expectations for us as musicians. And I find that, to revisit a piece sometimes takes more work. It takes more.
Yeah,
It, yeah, just
that's interesting. Oh, sorry, continue.
no, just yeah, just to also like in terms of playing the instrument, you perhaps might have to fix some habits, that's some old
Yeah,
habits, perhaps,
exactly.
but also musically. I mean, it's you know you want to say like I mean you know what kind of musical decisions you want to take, but at the same time, it may be hard to actually see past yourself in a certain light because you've played the piece so many times and kind of the way you've played it so far has been so far ingrained in you that it's very hard to change in a way.
Oh yeah.
And but that change is necessary because it reflects how we change as a human being. So yeah.
Yeah, it's you touched on a really really good point because I'm actually experiencing this right now. Like you spend so many years as a kid playing these certain specific concertos, for example, for viola, like Walton, like Stamitz, Hofmeister, really simple stuff. For violin, Mendelssohn. Anyway, so then as soon as you mature as a person, because with time and experience, you actually gain, more ideas, more viewpoints, aspects, perspectives, ways of capturing emotion, ways of creating emotion, and then when you revisit it, I've actually noticed for me, and my professor has actually noticed too, that you actually play it in the way that you played it the first time you learned it. So, for example,
Hmm.
me right now, I learned, sorry, the Forsyth Concerto for viola in G minor. 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, I learned it and I performed it or whatever, and it was good. But then I matured this year a lot as a musician, and when I went back to it, I played it the exact same way that I played it a year ago, but I have to actually learn how to break that habit and
Hmm.
use the experiences that I've gained to apply it into that situation. And
Yeah.
I actually wanted to know your opinion. Like, how do you go about doing that? Because I find that's something that a lot of musicians are actually struggling with now.
In a way, yeah, it's a very good question because I don't even think there is a sort of concrete
Oh, I
answer
don't
when
think
it
so
comes
either.
to
Yeah.
yeah, exact. It's something that is sort of mysterious because of course it's much easier uh, said than done. There has to be some sort of kind of release, I guess, or to sort of to let yourself go of every sort of I guess the sentiments or the sort of ideas that are attached to the piece or to whatever piece,
Yeah. So like start
and
fresh. Yeah.
start fresh to almost play as if I mean to almost think in your head that you've never played this piece before,
Oh yeah.
almost.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And
and
it's crazy how like performing specifically, like we'll touch on like performance anxiety and performance psychology and stuff. But just in general, when you're playing either during the performance or learning during a performance or learning in the practice room, there are so many psychological things that are happening. And um
absolutely. Yeah.
I had a master class with Andre Roy from McGill at Orford last year, and he was talking about how if your head isn't fried after you finish practicing, you didn't do it right. And in a sense, it's kind of a bad way to think about it, but it's also like a really good way because you have to be constantly thinking ahead, thinking during the moment, what is my arm doing, what am I feeling, what am I trying to create, all these stuff. And I don't know, how do you go about doing that type of stuff?
Yeah, that's actually a very good point because, in a way, for me, I always think of practice as first and foremost something that works the mind in a way that really, I mean, it's a real all-round mind exercise, first of all, and in a way, it's true. I think in practice, we almost have to be so overly particular with ourselves, kind of, in order to really achieve results, I find,
Yeah,
and to really be so particular to the point where you're picking on the smallest details. You just can't let anything
exactly. Yeah.
go, and when you get, let's say, to a rehearsal or to even a performance, then you find that then you are able to sort of let some of that go, and you are able to, let's say, enjoy yourself or to let things go or let things sink into the moment. But I think in practice, I think it's good to be almost a kind of a control freak to yourself. I think it's the place where you can really, I mean, when you are alone, that you're able to really test yourself and to challenge yourself in every single way.
Like
And
it's where you're like the most vulnerable, right?
exactly, yeah,
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 yeah. So
that's a
it's
good way
like
of putting it.
when I'm in
Yeah.
the practice room, for example, if I'm well, recently, if I'm not so nitpicky with myself, then like the expression is that when you go to performance, you've already done the work. So there's nothing to stress out about because you've already done the work. So you just need to show the work you've done.
Hmm.
Per playing through a piece is easy if you've done the work. But if you haven't done the work, you're actually stressing even more, and that's what creates, in my opinion, nerves and anxiety and all
Absolutely,
this
yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
So it's
yeah,
like you mentioned, being so meticulous and the smallest intonation, the smallest shift, the hand frame. That's why we spend so many hours practicing every single day, right? And
absolutely, yeah.
and the performance is as it like creates an emotional connection with the audience as a whole, right? So like one thing I've been noticing a lot is whenever I watch a performance, I'm not like, oh, they did that shift wrong, oh, they did that note wrong. Like in the end of the day, no one really cares, but it's just like the overall
It's
perspective
the
of the
exactly,
performance,
yeah.
right?
It's the
And
overall picture.
exactly, but to
Absolutely.
create that overall, you need to go nitpicky, and I think that's what's missing in some people in their practice rooms.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, I think that's it, in the practice room, it's you have to be able to do, I mean, to do even probably more work than you expect to do,
Oh
so
yeah.
that let's say before a concert, when you're in already the sort of rehearsal, the situation to let's say in the steps leading up to a concert, that you already feel like all the work has been done, and that all you have to basically now it's basically to let yourself go and to enjoy yourself almost. And that's basically, I think for me, that's very important because also when let's say I am so meticulously prepared, let's say for a performance, then I'm actually able, and this is an interesting thing that I think about is that when I feel so prepared, that also allows me to be more spontaneous on stage.
Right.
In that so many
Right.
of the fundamental points that you've covered in a way in the practice room are already there. They're set. I mean, there's basically you tell yourself that all the work has been done,
Yeah.
and now basically the sort of, I guess, what you could call the magic on stage
Yeah.
is sort of found in only that sort of circumstance, when you have extra adrenaline and when you have, let's say, when you know that this is the moment, and you're kind of put into the moment with all these different people, then you can really find something extra, and that's what makes live performances so special, I find.
Yeah.
If
Because the thing
everything
is, you
goes,
actually
yeah,
never know how they're gonna go
yeah,
with a live
exactly,
performance, right? And I think that that can be both a very scary thing and a very beautiful thing, right?
absolutely,
Like in my experiences in live performances, I've had performances where I have complete memory slips and like things just don't go as well, but that's just happens. But I've had performances where I don't remember the experience, but I only remember the after effect, right?
hmm,
And
yeah,
I'm like that's an important thing because to create a good performance or like this really nice after effect, you need to actually have really good perspective in the practice room, right? So
absolutely, yeah.
in the performance, like actually, I'm interested. Like, do you actually remember like your feelings during a performance? Like, do you actually think about that while you're playing?
In a way, let's say looking back to a concert, I mean, after it's happened, yeah, sometimes I do sometimes remember specific
Specific
moments,
moments,
even,
yeah.
yeah, actually that really stood out to me in my mind, or but in general, the feeling, I mean, you always know the feeling, the general feeling, it always lasts in a way.
Oh yeah.
Like, yeah, I find that, I mean, whether the concert went went okay, or went, if you did kind of, if it did present some sort of a sort of a nice moment, or if it didn't go so well, I mean, you always, it's that overall picture in a way of a
Hmm.
performance that creates that feeling. And yeah, and that's in a way a guide, sort of a guiding factor also for me to work towards the next performance. And let's say if I'm performing the piece again and again, then is to really look back and see if I remember. Of course, I mean, the feeling is always there. It urges you to continue to work and to get better. But also, sometimes you nitpick at certain moments that you remember, and you try and apply that for next time. So it's always a continuous process. Yeah.
Yeah, like you mentioned, enjoying the performance and then trying to enjoy it the next time. But by doing that, are you anticipating, and do you think that would actually benefit you? Because in my experience, having enjoyed a moment and then trying to recreate that moment, that's like you said, the magic. It usually doesn't go so well.
Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah. So
absolutely. It's
like,
something.
yeah,
I think you make a good point because I find that I don't ever try and try and emulate the spontaneous,
yeah,
like
you
the
just
thing
create it. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. But let's say certain factors of yeah, certain factors which are controllable, that you do look back into a performance and try and remember that and apply for next time. But I find that the spontaneousness is different for every single performance. The spontaneity, I mean,
yeah, yeah,
it's sometimes, a performance, every performance is different. I find that even say it's sort of different life events almost, because there's certain performances where sometimes you go into each one differently. Even, it's not just coming away from each concert feeling differently, but also going into a concert. Sometimes you just, you don't feel good at all because, let's say, you haven't had as much time to prepare, or if you really don't
tired or
like, you're
psychologically
tired.
drained.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. You're just not in the right mind, or you just don't even want to be on stage at all. Or sometimes you just really really want to lose yourself in the moment. So it's kind of,
yeah,
it can go either way. And so every performance, like, I try and treat every performance from a clean, from scratch almost. Yeah.
yeah. And like continuing on from that, like two things. Like, let's see if I remember the second one. But like, something that my teacher actually told me when I was a kid is he kept telling me that musicians are actors, right? And so like when an actor is performing, it's creating the emulation of some sort of being, or just like this creating some sort of emotion, captivation, whatever, from the audience, of some sort of emotion from the piece. And so we're trying to like actually create these things from scratch, basically, from instruments. But just like I heard this thing in an interview, I don't remember where, they talked about how if you look in the mirror and you smile and you laugh, suddenly you feel happier, something like that. It's like a reverse psychology kind of thing. And so it's kind of like
Yeah,
when
yeah,
you're
yeah.
performing and you're actually like trying to create this emotion, like how do you go about actually creating that emotion? Because like you mentioned, like having it being a clean slate, but sometimes you actually aren't in the mood. So how do you actually make yourself in the mood? Kind of like because you have to, or else you're gonna like do a bad concert, or like how would you do
Yeah,
that?
that's such an important and difficult point, actually,
Yeah.
because it's so, in a way, we are actors in a certain way, I think. But in that we try and, really try and present a certain picture. We're just kind of painting a certain structure or a certain image,
Yeah.
in sound. And basically, we do. But I find that what we do in the music and what comes out is always through us. So it's always through sentiments that are already there, kind of, in our being, that are there, that maybe just need to be unearthed. And sometimes
Okay.
reactions to the music, when you try and lose yourself when the music starts, it's sort of, some of that, it causes a reaction where, for me, sometimes it draws certain feelings or certain memories, even,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
uh, while playing, and that sort of drives me on.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's sort of the driving
It's
driving
funny you
factor, and
mentioned.
you sort of try and
Yeah.
amplify that. Yeah.
Exactly. It's funny you mentioned memories because uh, this is a little weird, but like from time to time, I find myself just improvising on the instrument, and I take certain because like in psychology they say like when you're, for example, if you're upset, you listen to sad music, right? So you over amplify the feeling, and then once you over
Hmm.
amplify it, you actually stabilize. You actually feel more stabilized after. And so if, for example, I'm feeling sad and I improvise, I overdo that emotion in the music in my improvisation on any instrument, with certain chords, certain dissonances, whatever. And then by doing that, I'm over amplifying the emotion, and then I actually feel pretty stable after that. So when you're performing, how would you go about that? Because I'm just interested to know your opinion on that. Like, if you're, for example, not in the mood, and then you perform a piece that you have to be in the mood in, how do you go into creating that without the factors you mentioned?
Yeah, in a way, I find that, let's say, if you were supposed to, a good example of this is always the Mozart concertos, I
Oh
find,
yeah,
because the Mozart concertos are just so.
simple.
I mean, if you imagine Mozart, I mean, as a 19 or 18-year-old when he wrote those concertos, I mean, you can imagine someone who was, of course, you know, incredibly well, like incredibly gifted, but also you can sort of imagine him being some sort of, sort of, childish, almost even
Yeah,
immature, in that the way there is that comedic element that we need to bring out,
yeah,
and that is there, I think. But the thing is, I think some of that, those qualities in Mozart, and of course, of the music, are just already there in some way. It's weird,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's weird, and they are present. And I guess when you start to, let's say, try and unfold a certain musical phrase, then the effort that requires, in a way, already brings you to a different sort of state than you were before. It's sort of a natural reaction to, I guess, how we are conditioned as musicians, is to just to, when we start, kind of playing the music, it's sort of automatically, for me, almost, uh, at least, it sort of automatically brings me to a different state, in a way.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And yeah, yeah, and it's a weird thing, because it's hard to explain how, let's say,
Yeah,
sometimes to get into the mood for
for a certain
certain
passage,
pieces
or
which
yeah,
require, exactly, for that require, let's say, a very specific
yeah,
color, or a very
yeah,
specific mood. But somehow I find that it's always, it's it's a matter of almost setting up for it. And sometimes I find that the music itself is enough to actually, get me to, let's say, just for that moment, to see if I can bring out certain things in that passage, or a certain emotion, but at the same time relates, let's say, to the overall curve
yeah.
of the piece. So yeah,
I'm sure like
it's a very
yeah,
interesting question. Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sure like the idea that you mentioned of memories will happen whether you like it or not, during a performance. If you're playing something that's very meticulous, or like, for example, like Yusai sonata, Yusai violin pieces, those are very like cloudy and very, mysterious sometimes, and very in your face sometimes, and very rock and roll sometimes.
Mhm.
And it's
Yeah,
like, I'm sure when you do it, you're already creating some sort of imagery in your head, whether you like it or not. You can't control that, right? Because that's subconscious. So I'm
absolutely.
sure it'll
Yeah.
happen either way. But the important thing here is that to create that, you need the technique, right? And something that I'm always trying to figure about is the importance of habits, right? And you know how they say like
Hmm.
a habit forms, or like in 3 weeks if you, or 4 weeks if you do it right, or something like that. But um,
Yeah.
for you specifically, how has your habits actually helped you? Because I honestly, like, there are a lot of people who say like, oh, I need to have this exact practice schedule where I have to do scales for an hour, I have to do this for an hour, I have to do this for an hour, and if I don't do those three, then I can't do the fourth. Like, is that good
Hmm.
compared to doing what you need to do for upcoming events? And how do you go about that, or practicing, for example?
In a way, I find, yeah, in a way, that's a good question when it comes to practicing, because I find, for me, I always try and embrace, because I live such a sort of, a very heavily charged lifestyle at the moment.
Yeah.
I find that it's I always try and embrace irregularity somehow, like,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, in a way that you're not really consistent, that you're not really looking for consistency, that you're always, let's say one day you are searching for one thing, and if it works, I try not to repeat it in a way, because then you try and find another solution that works, or perhaps,
Yeah.
and in a way, it's kind of, these sort of things to do with irregularity. I think it's good because when, let's say, when the time comes in the sort of concert lifestyle where you don't actually get that much time to pick up a piece for a performance, let's say, or to prepare, or to get the sort of comfort that you normally would expect in the practice room, let's say, for an extended period
Period of time. Yeah.
of time. It's a sort of, I guess the first step for me would be to sort of to embrace irregularity, to embrace the fact that you really cannot maintain,
Yeah.
even if you can, or if you have the chance to do that. I find it's interesting also to train the mind in that aspect, to kind of to always look
Like be on your feet, Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Always kind of keep things on your tippy toes, and on the tips of your fingers, that you're always like kind of almost you always feel almost uncomfortable somehow.
Yeah, like just as society and people in general, like whenever something works, you always try and figure out what you did to make it work, and then you try and do that exactly again. But just
Yeah.
like you can't do the performance or a piece the exact same way a second time, that won't work, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's really interesting that you actually think the same way, because probably three-quarters of the people that I talk to say, oh, I do scales for an hour, and then I do studies for an hour, and then I do this for an hour, and then right after that I can work on my concerto. But like, if you have a concert tomorrow on your concerto, don't do your studies. Like,
Yeah.
well, or
Yeah.
do maybe like 20 minutes of like a little Kreutzer 7 or something. But like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, no, it's interesting. And so, as far as practice schedule for you, quote unquote, how do you organize that?
It really depends these days. I think sometimes I just practice. I mean, when I have, let's say, a list of repertoire for upcoming concerts, then I just practice what I need to practice. Of course, I mean that's sort of
Like specific sections, or you
yeah.
wouldn't do the whole piece, just specific sections you need to work on?
Of course you do everything. You kind of work on specific sections. You break the piece down, and of
Yeah.
course near the end you do run over pieces, and you make sure that they work in a sort of concert setting.
Yeah.
But I find that it's uh, practice sessions now are kind of, for me, I always like to do, like, in the practice session, things that, let's say, I don't need to, that are different from what I'm playing in concert sometimes.
Okay.
And that when you combine, let's say, uh, yeah, pieces that you are preparing at the moment with, let's say, a piece that you're just learning for fun in a
Okay.
way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There is that duality there.
Right, right, right.
And I think that is also a key factor of maintaining freshness, I guess.
Yeah, and
Or
also
all that.
sanity.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Because
Like
I
if
think
you're
sometimes,
constantly doing something, you're gonna go insane.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And you always want to just keep yourself informed with different perspectives, and kind of go about things, and with different points of view. And I find that really helps in a way when you're really so focused. Let's say if you're preparing for a very important concert, and you just and it's stressing you out, because it's something important, and it's a big piece, and you have to really get it up to speed. I find, though, in those situations, the best way to prepare is to really, instead of working day and night on the piece, is sort of, you just really, like, you set aside a time where you really focus on the piece,
Hmm.
but then you also allow equally, like, an equal amount of time where you can actually take your mind off that piece, in a way that you
Right,
can
like
that you
would
can
would
say.
mental practicing, like for example, listening to the piece, looking at a score, or just like talking to yourself, okay, when I get to bar 7, I do this, and then third finger and a shift, and then this and that. Would that count as being engaged in the piece, or does that not count?
That counts, definitely.
Oh, it does
Yeah,
count. Okay, okay.
that
So when you're
definitely
setting
counts.
aside time, that doesn't count either.
That when you're setting aside time, like, for a certain piece, I mean, that could be either, you can be thinking, yeah, you could be really thinking about the piece. You could be in front of the score. you could be working on with the instrument as long as you have that time to really intensely, let's say, prepare that piece. But then also, then there has to come, let's say, a period in the day where you just have to separate yourself completely from that worry and from let's say the concern of getting this piece ready, and then you just sort of, continue to exercise your mind, but at the same time on other things, let's say, on other pieces which you are just learning, or if you just want to do for fun, just because, I mean, just so that you're still practicing, you're still keeping yourself in shape, and you're still exercising your mind, because you are using, you are still practicing these pieces seriously, but at the same time to take your mind off something that's
so serious.
That's so serious, and that is sort of provides you with more pressure than you really need,
Mm-hmm.
and I find that this kind of thing alleviates that kind of pressure, because I think pressure is something that we put on ourselves, of course, but I find that if we do sort of focus on one thing, only one thing every single day for all these hours, it's just natural that we would accumulate a lot of pressure, and therefore kind of unnatural expectations, I guess. And I find that to have a balance between, or to realize that whether if it's an important concert or if you're just playing for friends, it's the same. It should be the same thing in a way.
Okay, explain on that. What do you mean by that?
In a way, I find that when we do give ourselves pressure, it's sort of it's a complex thing, because it takes its root, I mean, deep into the mentality of performing, in a way, and that that in order to sort of think that way, in order to think that let's say, that you're able to go on stage, let's say in a big concert in front of 2,000 people, is the same sort of feeling that you get, let's say, playing a house concert for friends. And I find that requires kind of an unconditional, let me try and explain this. But for me, it requires an unconditional respect for all the people involved, in a way.
Okay,
Regardless if let's say, whether they're friends of yours, or if they're critics, that are there to watch and evaluate the concert, or if there is someone there that you want to, I mean, let's say if there's someone in the audience which you want to impress, which of course is not something that I find particularly helpful in a way to think
same,
of.
Yep.
But I think whether they are that kind of person, or they're a critic, or if there's just a little child even, or a friend, or someone who doesn't go to concerts, is not very familiar with this sort of music, it's the same. I find it's useful to think of as every concert goer, I mean, to sort of have an unconditional respect for every single concert goer, regardless of why they are there and who they are, I find. And that's I mean, a lot of these things, it's much easier said than done. And
definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. But
that
find
comes with experience, right? Too.
Yeah, exactly. I find that sometimes, that after giving a certain amount of concerts, and that just having enough, having gone through a lot of these ups and downs, that I find that in the end, it's like when the storm clears after all this time, it's sort of, it's no different. I mean, between those experiences where you are playing for friends, or you are just playing even for yourself.
Yeah. You're still playing, right?
Yeah, exactly. You're just playing. It's sort of like a natural catharsis. It's an expression. It doesn't really change whether there is someone watching you or not. And I think that's something that's so necessary, or so essential to grasp when it comes to being a performer, because, the energy around you doesn't change in a way. You still feel that sort of, you're still surrounded in your own world, of course. And if there are people, I mean, if there are people in the concert hall that are sharing that experience, it's great, it's wonderful. But I don't think that's a sort of, I don't think that's something that should, to that should change what you're doing in a way and give you, and therefore give you, different pressure, or a different expectation for things. And yeah.
Yeah, well, it's funny. You were talking about creating a mindset during when you're not in the mood, creating a mindset to do the performance, and then now we're talking about creating a mindset of the audience themselves, right? So the people that I wouldn't say you don't care for, but aren't as important to you in your career as, I guess, like the people judging you compared to the people just watching. But I'm assuming like you're mentioning like putting them in a middle ground, all of them at the same level as far as expectation and reality. So it's like the people who are judging you are just like your friends watching you, or just like the kid who's watching you too. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
And
like,
I think everyone is, I mean, regardless of who they are and how they are. I mean, of course, everyone is a judge, but I find that there's just everyone is there, you know. You would hope for the music in a way,
right, for the same reason.
You
yeah,
remind yourself
exactly.
that they are there for a concert, that they are there for the music, and in a way you think of yourself as also, or you could probably also imagine yourself as an audience member, and
Right.
that's when you go on stage. It's not about, let's say, it's not about you speaking, let's say, or really doing your thing, but let's say the thing that you sort of witness the thing, the music coming out of you. It's a weird.
No, that actually makes sense. Actually, this is like probably the last comment and question before we end. I wanted to ask, because we can all tell when someone is genuinely in love with music, or when someone is being forced to love music, or or they just don't care. You can kind of just tell, which is kind of the whole reason of this whole podcast, like Life with a Sixth Sense. So understanding people without them actually explaining it, right? And so when you're performing, how do you go about genuinely showing that you love the music so that people can actually interpret that in their own way? How do you go about doing that?
In a way, you just have to be true. You just have to be, I mean, when it comes to the music, you really have to, well, first of all, before you even learn the piece, I hope that you would, kind of, you would love
the piece
piece,
before
and you would
doing
actually
it.
see
Yeah.
this. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that you would actually see the certain possibilities that are offered to you in the piece to express, let's say, something that you really want to express, whether it be, let's say, something that encompasses, a feeling or emotion, or
Or a memory. Yeah.
Exactly. And I find that, it's so, as you say, it's easier to tell that when people really do appreciate music versus those that do not, or that kind of are there for the sake of, I don't know, something else. But it's
money
really,
or something,
it's so
yeah.
exactly. But it's the same thing for performers in a way, and that you could really, it's very easy to sense if
Right.
a performance, if a performer is there for the sake of kind of just playing because he's there and he's a performer and he's playing, or if the performer is there and really, really cares about what he's doing. And not only that, but it is also painting kind of the most honest picture he can, or can. And I find that's the most kind of, I find, for when it comes to giving, let's say, to giving a very honest kind of performance, you just have to be honest. You just have to be to do it because, of course you love it, of course, from the very first minute, but you use the experience, I guess, to really be able to express something that is essential to you, basically. Because I think being on stage, we are lucky as musicians having the opportunity, being on stage and having, I guess, one of the only moments that we can find in life to fully expose ourselves.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah. I completely agree.
yeah,
And it's going back to the beginning of our conversation. You mentioned, like, we talked about being vulnerable in the practice room, and just being super, like, just letting yourself go sometimes, and just feeling it. And when you're performing, it should be the same way. But for some reason, when we play, I feel like some people feel like they have to act a certain way, or they have to move a certain way, or, do a specific type of vibrato to be seen a certain way or interpreted a certain way. But in
hmm
reality, automatically, in like 2 seconds of, like, just like if you do an orchestra audition, 5 seconds into the audition, they can tell if they want you or not. Right. So
yeah,
it's just like
yeah,
when watching a
absolutely.
concert, 3 seconds into meeting the person or meeting someone for the first time or in a job interview or something, you can automatically tell if you're going to get along with this person's music, this person's personality, all that. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah,
so it's like,
yeah,
as long as you are vulnerable, I guess, in a way with yourself, I guess it makes sense that when you perform, you're kind of just like being vulnerable with the audience. So kind of just meeting them for the first time and
absolutely.
doing what
Yeah,
you're doing because you love it, right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, no, for sure. I find that it's a combination. It's the whole picture basically that's being presented, and that's what is able to create that kind of certain that very first impression. And I find that as long as musicians are there, and and what they do on stage or the music that they play that they end up doing is a result of a very natural urge to express, or just a natural very reaction to, let's say, their love of music, or some very sort of uh, honest purpose. Then I find that's basically, to me, anyone with those qualities can be, or with that sort of goal in mind, can be a performer
Oh
and
yeah,
can say something.
100%.
Absolutely.
100%.
So yeah,
All
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Well, I think that's about it for today's podcast. But I just wanted to quickly ask, where can the listeners find your work, find your recordings, stuff like that? Is there any albums that you have out that we could look up?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have so far I have 3.5 CDs that I've done, and I say half because one is a mini album. But you can find all the information on my CDs on my website,
Okay.
and which is kirsonleong.com. Very simple. And also you can always follow me on my YouTube channel and my social media accounts, because I'm always posting material. I'm quite keen these days on documenting, let's say, day-to-day life,
Oh
and
yeah.
also when it comes to the musical life and what goes on in practice. Let's say if I sometimes have new ideas, or if I capture a certain moment, then it's gonna be captured, and on my Facebook or Instagram accounts for sure. And yeah, and these days, I mean, I just started my own vlog, actually.
Yeah, yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, and 2 weeks ago, and it's just sort of something through which I can create a sort of live diary, or I can express certain things which mean a
Yeah.
lot to me, or if I can document certain special experiences. So yeah, I'll be very active in a way on social media, and of course, um, you can always find also my events and concerts and all that, but
On your
especially
Facebook
on
page and
social
stuff,
media.
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, everything's going to be on those platforms. So yeah.
So I'll definitely take all of your links and some of your videos maybe, and I'll put them in the description in the podcast when this features in a week or two. Okay. So all right. Thank you so much, Kirsten. But stay on the line. I'll talk to you right after. But I'm just gonna do the outro really quickly.
Okay. Yeah. No
All right.
problem.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you.
All right. So that was Kirsten Leong, amazing violinist, super genuine person. So we've talked about a lot of things. We talked about habits in the practice room. We talked about understanding emotion, feeling emotion, perspective during a performance. And these are all just really interesting topics. And I'll actually be writing some more detail on my opinion on it in my blog, which I'll put in the description below. So that was Life with a Sixth Sense, Noful Jare, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you for being here.